Hi everyone, I'm Sam.
I'm Natalie.
I'm Lexi, and you're tuned in to Make It Make Sense. In today's episode, we'll be discussing financial aid.
Great. So to get started, I just want to ask kind of a general icebreaker question. How important was financial aid in determining what college or university you would attend?
It's something I didn't really think about too hard. It was definitely something I was aware of, and I was like, oh yeah, I should probably think about this. But yeah, I was 18. I was like, F you, mom, I'm leaving. I don't want to be here. I'm just choosing a school. So that's that's what I did. I was considering a few schools that would have been a little cheaper than DePaul, honestly, but I like being out here and away from family. So
I actually paid a lot of attention to financial aid. It was the reason why I ended up going to DePaul because with all the scholarships I was able to receive, like I got one from the last minute from the sales leadership department that covered like my entire cost of tuition. So I ended up being lucky. But yeah, initially I wasn't planning on coming to DePaul. I was thinking about University of Kentucky or Howard, which are completely different from DePaul in general. So for me to choose to stay home, that was a tough decision because I wanted to be like you, Lexi, and get away. Now I'm here.
Yeah, so when I went to school, it was something I thought about, but it wasn't something I thought about really hard. One of the options I was looking at was UW-Madison, and I'm from Minnesota, so we have reciprocity there. So like you get in-state tuition for going to that other school. And my mom was basically like, if you went here, you would have no student loans. We'd be able to take care of everything. And like everyone was driving around on these little like Vespas there. She's like, we could even buy you a Vespa like to get around campus. It would be great. And I was like, no, I'm gonna go to Sarah Lawrence College, which at the time was literally the most expensive college in the country. And I loved it. I just loved it there. So I ended up going, and I actually, had a decent financial aid package, and my parents were able to help some. And I didn't come out with a lot of student loan debt, really, comparatively. I think I only had to borrow subsidized loans throughout. It was just like, this is where I want to go. And my parents said they'd figure out a lot of it. So I was lucky in that respect.
And I can't believe you passed up a Vespa. That's crazy.
I know. I think I would have liked the Vespa, but half of my high school was going to Madison, and I did not want to be in college with half of my high school.
So that was a good segue into our discussion for today. So our first question is, when you entered college, what was your knowledge of financial aid packages? Did you feel like your high school well prepared you for understanding one?
my understanding was pretty limited. I knew scholarships were a thing because every summer since like 7th grade, my mom was like, apply for scholarships. And I was like, oh, these are terrible. And I knew loans were a thing because everyone just talks about loans. I think grants were the thing I knew the least about. As far as my school preparing me, I know they had a program and they tried. I still didn't really feel like I got an understanding of like sub versus unsub, pair plus, and like all of that mess. So I put that on the job.
I think it might have been clear from my intro, but I really had absolutely no concept of it. And even after I graduated from college and was applying to medical schools, even though I had accepted, I didn't end up going. But I didn't even do the FAFSA for my med school. And my mom later on was like, I knew you weren't going because you didn't do the FAFSA. And I was like, I didn't even realize I had to do the FAFSA. Like, I don't know. Clearly, I have come a long way since then in my understanding of financial aid. But I don't think my high school even had any kind of program. I don't feel like my high school counselors even talked to me remotely about financial aid or financially preparing for college. It was all about test scores and essays and stuff.
Yeah, same for me. I felt like a lot of the things that I learned was pretty much on my own. Like there was no formal educational program at my high school about financial aid, unfortunately. And when I would get the packages, I'd be like, oh, like this is a lot of money. They're giving me $100,000. And then it's like, oh, but that's all loans. Like that's not free money. So thankfully, I at least knew the benefits of like scholarships and grants, but I didn't necessarily understand loans fully, like unsubsidized versus subsidized loans. The education that I have now is pretty much from being in this job, which I'm thankful for. But Otherwise, I probably still wouldn't know anything about financial aid packages. So, what are the components of a financial aid package?
Well, I think we've talked a lot about them in little bits and pieces, but really it's going to be a package from your school that has both academic components, or at least at DePaul, academic components, so those are your merit-based scholarships, and then need-based components, which are things that come from your FAFSA. So that would be your grants, your federal, state, and school grants. The Pell Grant for federal, MAP grant for state, and the DePaul grant for school. And then your loans, so your subsidized loans and your unsubsidized loans, as well as potentially any parent loans that you might see, or if you're a graduate student, graduate loans.
So the difference between unsubsidized and subsidized loans is when they start accruing interest. So for subsidized loans, the government pays your interest. So interest doesn't start accruing until 6 months after the deferment period, which is when loan repayments actually kick in. Whereas unsubsidized loans, interest starts accruing right away. There's no grace period for that. The government doesn't pay your interest. It always keeps accruing, and that's just how unsubsidized loans do their thing. So that's the main difference, is when you have to start paying interest.
Can someone explain the difference between scholarships and grants?
Scholarships, like Natalie was saying, they do tend to have an academic component, especially when students are just applying to the school. So whatever your GPA was in high school, the school will maybe give you a little bit of money. But then there are also external scholarships. At DePaul, we have a resource, the DePaul Scholarship Connect website, where you can see external scholarships posted there. And then there are also DePaul internal scholarships posted there as well. And then as far as grants go, there really isn't an academic component. It's all need-based. So whatever money you put on the FAFSA for like what you're making, what your parents are making, etc., the government does some calculations and decides which grants you are eligible for, and then you get some grant money. Both scholarships and grants do not need to be paid back, though.
Thank you. That was a great definition. Something that comes up a lot when students are questioning like their financial aid package is SAP. Can someone explain SAP, and how can not meeting the requirements for it impact a student's financial aid?
So SAP stands for Satisfactory Academic Progress. And it's one of the things that's important in maintaining your financial aid eligibility. As you go through college, you're supposed to hit particular milestones that kind of show your academic progress. So part of that is maintaining a solid GPA, so maintaining an above a 2.0 grade point average. And another big part is completing your coursework in a timely fashion. So you have to complete 66% of every credit hour you attempt in order to stay in solid satisfactory academic progress. For an example, like a student could maybe be doing poorly in 2 of their classes. Maybe they're taking 4 classes like they do here at DePaul. They're doing A's in 2, poorly in 2 others. If they withdraw from those 2 other classes, they'd still have a 4.0 GPA, but they'd only have completed 50% of the credits they attempted. So that could actually get them onto a SAP warning, even though they have a really high GPA requirement. So when you're not meeting your satisfactory academic progress, you can potentially lose your scholarships, your merit-based scholarships, because you're falling below a 2.0, which means that you don't have eligibility for those scholarships. And then you can also potentially lose financial aid eligibility for your federal financial aid. So your student loans, potentially some of your grants as well, could be suspended because you're not meeting academic progress. So for students that aren't meeting that, they generally will end up on a warning term and have a chance to like bring that back up. But if they continue to not meet it, they can lose that aid eligibility.
Let's talk a little bit about students that might need additional money to cover their cost of attendance or tuition. If a student does need additional money to cover their cost of attendance, what are some resources that you recommend they look into?
Something that I would say, I don't know how many students do it, but definitely file an appeal. I feel like a lot of people don't even know that appeals exist. And the worst thing that can happen is no, that they say no, you don't get any extra money. But like the best thing is like you get a little bit of extra money, which like who would say no to that? So definitely look into appeals, and those are super easy to find. You can just Google DePaul financial aid appeals and the two forms should come up.
Can you explain what an appeal is for people that may not know?
There are two different ways to file an appeal at DePaul. There's an income-based one. So that one is a good option for students who, like a parent lost their job or some other really traumatic finance thing happened so that their FAFSA is no longer very accurate and like they should be getting more money. And then there's also a non-income related appeal form. So that one is like, no, nothing's really changed, but like I just need more money. Like it just didn't do enough for me. And for that one, you tend to just write like a quick essay to DePaul about like why you need the money, that you like DePaul, like want to go there. And that's what you need to do for that one. Whereas for the income-based one, you do need to show proof of like job loss, and there's just a lot more numbers involved.
So another thing to think about with an appeal is a lot of times students, like Lexi said, don't know they exist, but they maybe think like, well, my needs aren't as big as someone else's needs, so like maybe I shouldn't file an appeal. It's like Lexi said, it's always worth filing. And really those differences in income-based versus non-income-based, choosing which one to file. Like, let's say that your family made like $2,000 or $3,000 less one year than they did. I wouldn't file an income-based appeal for that, because that's not gonna, just in the formula for financial aid, probably make a huge difference. But if you're looking at, big medical bills, something we look at is a sibling in private school tuition, like we said, job loss, separation, those bigger events, that makes more sense for an income-based appeal. And those non-income-based appeals, just like pour your heart out. Tell our staff what's going on, and we're all humans and we try to do everything we can for our students.
Our last question is, what is some advice for incoming and prospective DePaul University students regarding financial aid?
So I think the big thing to think about, and this is probably more for our prospective students than our incoming students, but it applies to everybody, is don't be scared off by the sticker price of the school. Our big $41,000 tuition, is a number that can be a big turnoff, I guess, for some students. There's no way I can ever come up with that amount of money. But once you get your financial aid package, things actually look a little bit different. Your actual cost versus the sticker price might be significantly different based on scholarships, grants, and even potentially loans. So I think that applying and seeing what you're offered is probably the best first advice. Filling out the FAFSA early. It opens up on October 1st every year for the next upcoming school year. So making sure you get that FAFSA in as early as possible is also really important.
For me, I'd say don't be afraid to ask for help. I feel like a lot of students tend to suffer in silence and they're like, I don't know how to do this. I'll deal with it when I graduate. And then they're like, I'll deal with it when the repayments start kicking in. And then, they just keep pushing it back. And then they're like, shoot, why did I wait so long? And there's no need to do that really. I mean, unless you really want to, that's definitely not recommended. Like, we are here to help students, and I'm trying not to just be biased because I work in DePaul Central, but like genuinely everyone knows what they're talking about. They just want to help students and figure out like what's going on, how you can come up with more money, or just like a plan for like paying off loans, like for financial fitness. And like all of that is super helpful, and it seems really stressful. And I think that's why a lot of people tend to avoid it, is because they don't really want to confront their upcoming reality when they start graduating, and that's going to be their life for like at least the next 10 years. But it's hard. Confront it sooner than later. It's something that you're going to have to do. If you don't do it, like, you're just going to be confused and be like, oh, I wish I had more time to think about it. So like while you're in school, while you have like a year or so, at least like a year out, just be like, okay, this is something that I'm going to have to do. Start calculating repayment prices, see what options you have. And if you don't know about anything, then just ask and reach out. We're always here.
Yes, that was very well said. For me, I would call like the financial aid offices of the schools that I was accepted to and ask if there were any ways to get additional scholarship or grant money. And for some schools, that was very effective. For some, like they were just like, we gave you what we have. So definitely do that, because that's actually how I found out about the EDGE program my freshman year, was by talking to a financial aid counselor saying that I was in need of more money. Thankfully, I was accepted into it. So you never know who may help you.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Sam. You never know until you ask. And, us as employees of DePaul Central, we know what the FAFSA says, we know what your file says, and we're operating based on that. But if there's more information, if there's something we don't know, if there's some more money that you need, let us know, ask, reach out. And everyone in DePaul Central can kind of help you figure out what your costs are for the year, making an appointment with a financial aid counselor to just talk about how much your aid is and how much tuition is, and really figuring out what that bottom line cost is can be really reassuring, so you and your family know what you're actually going to be paying over the course of the year. And then with financial fitness, not only can we look at that same, year cost, but we can really think about predicting, 2, 3, 4 years down the line for graduation. What does that total loan potential debt look like? What do repayment plans look like? And I personally think knowing is better than not knowing. That might not be everyone's preference, but I think it's more calm to know if you have a plan. You can kind of understand what you're looking forward to and figure out if you do need more funding and how to ask for that additional help.
Another thing that I would recommend is, if you belong to like a particular college, looking for scholarships and grants that they might have available. Also, if you like have something in particular that you might want to cover the cost for. So for me, I completed study abroad programs. They have their own subset of scholarships available as well. So make sure you exercise all your resources available, and Google will be your best friend.
Thank you all for tuning in to our 9th episode. Be sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at DePaul Central for more updates.
Perfect.